Testing, testing. Hello, and welcome to A Common Ground. My name is Zahavah Mashayah. I am also addressed by many different names, such as Lollipop, Pop, Drakel, Kel, and my government official name once was Antoinette McMahon, but now is Antoinette Thompson. Personally, I prefer Zahavah Mashayah. You might ask, what does your name mean? Well, Zahavah means gold in ancient Hebrew. It also means to be gilded, which is to become covered thinly with gold leaf or gold paint, to be wealthy and privileged. And Mashayah means the will of Yah. Sometimes it is known as wisdom. Also, I once saw a research article that stated the name also means anointed. Zahavah Mashayah. Fortunately, I am a known sinner, seeking to be known righteous. So the world may not view me how I view myself today because of how I may presented myself yesterday. Of course, we all make mistakes, and humility does come before honor, but some things you just learn to avoid. I'm still learning. In the world, I'm known as delusionals. Others say I'm lucid, which is to be expressed clearly and easy to understand, sometimes reasonable. Some say I'm proud, others believe I'm ashamed. Many say I'm feeble-minded. I say that I'm ingenious. I'm sorry. It means to be clever or of originality and inventive. I call it a true Israelite. We all may be valid, but that depends on the viewpoint and circumstances at hand. I may think I know me a little better than anyone else, but you may see things that I don't see, and that could help me. I believe that's why it's valid for people to state their opinion and or fact on a public situation, but it all comes down to how it's being presented. So, before we judge or jump to conclusions, let's look at my life and pieces of my childhood in my shoe with a common ground. Young childhood. I remember living in Texas with my mother before we all moved to Louisiana, and I also remember getting kicked out of kindergarten. It was said that my teacher at Bells Elementary, somewhere in Texas, wrote a 2 to 4 page essay on why I shouldn't be in school. After that, I remember being at home, stabbing holes in my paper picture that was printed of me and my big sister. I knew then that if I misbehaved in that way to raise a question, then I would get special attention from the white lady when she came, and she would give me bubbles and candy from her box. Now that I'm older, I see from history and experience that I never received the love and attention that I felt I deserved, which to my knowledge was an average treatment. I wanted to be treated average, but I wasn't the average kid. I felt like the black sheep because I overheard adults talking about how they felt one day, and I remember feeling the same way, and they called themselves a black sheep of the family, and it stuck with me ever since. I had eczema. I felt my feelings as a child were abandoned, and I was picked on as a kid because everyone had simple names, and my name was very complex. After that, we ended up moving to Louisiana. I also remember when I was young, my grandfather Jackson told me that I was one of the richest kids my mother had because the government was sending me money every month. I didn't believe him because they never gave it to me, but my older sister always had money when I didn't, so I thought she was richer. Almost every time I visited my grandfather, he told me something new about me that I didn't know. One day, he said, "Look here, Pop, you not dumb. Everybody think you crazy because you getting that little check." You ain't crazy. You got some sense. Don't let them fool you. But I just brushed it off like, what is this crazy old man talking about? Yeah. What are snacks at, Paw Paw? But every other month, he told me the same thing until I finally asked my mother. From my mother's place, she said, mind a child's business and stop listening to what everybody says. That was a true fact. But my grandfather always kept me in the information loop because he talked about everybody. But he instilled a positive outlook on me when everyone else around me looked at me as the trouble-talking kid with eczema. Since then, I always wondered, is there anything wrong with me? Nonetheless, it wasn't anything major. Neither was I diagnosed with any special disability. I'm sure around that time, since I was kicked out of school, the government was throwing away money and my mother got lucky and caught it. And I don't blame her. So here I am in elementary school, being bullied for having bad skin, not having friends, and I had a plethora of different names. The first big one was internet. I cried so hard on the inside because the people who I thought were my friends made fun of me. But those same friends always needed help in certain classes, and I always desired to be a bad kid to fit in, so I gave them the answers on my tests and helped them in math class because I knew it was wrong, but I wanted to fit in. So I thought that's how friends were, and I settled for it. My middle childhood. Here I am coming into middle school and learning that I am what people thought of me. My middle childhood is where I believe my mental trauma started. This stage is where I was molested as a child, and that opened many doors of thoughts about my body that didn't make sense. Around this time is when I became aware of an adult life at a young age. Time went on, and it was sort of pushed under a rug, but I learned to adapt to the situation and found different ways to satisfy my new imaginations. That brings us on into my adolescent days. Adolescence. Around this time is when my virginity was taken and when I started to do drugs. It was an unfortunate situation, and certain people took advantage of me, but I thought it was just a way to satisfy those imaginations that were planted within me in middle childhood. So from the molestation to the uncleanliness on the TV, down to the parties my family had, and on to the music that was played around me, I was what I was around. But in that, this is when I started to seek a God or something. I started reading my Bible, but I couldn't understand it because the words were weird in the King James Version, so I lost interest. I was only 14. Luckily, my mother always dragged us to church, and best believe me, we were getting inside of that choir. So around this time is when I started to pay attention to what I was being taught in the Bible. I also developed a fear to sing or to be heard solo on a song because I didn't like hearing my own voice. One day, the pastor said that Jesus died for us. We are under a new covenant to where we don't do all that old stuff they used to do, like keep the commandments, sleep in tents, because we drive cars now, and we don't really plan our own food, etc., etc. And I asked the Sunday school teacher, Miss TM, and she agreed and gave me confidence that God's grace and mercy is all we needed because he died for us in the New Testament. But that day, I remember reading Matthew 5:17, where Jesus said he didn't come to destroy the law or the prophets, but to fulfill them. I didn't say anything back to her because she was the teacher, so I accepted what she said, but I never stopped questioning whether or not it was right or wrong. Now, around this time, I was in high school, battling with mental trauma, having a hard time focusing in every class but math and science, developing a bad attitude, and learning how to maneuver with my new body. All in all, here is where I decided I was different. I wanted to stand out. Not only were my legs super long, but I always had to unhinge my brand new school pants just so it could cuff over my shoelace to not look like I was flooding. Once I reached the summer of my senior year, I moved to Texas to start 12th grade in a different environment. This is when I had the desire to become an entrepreneur. Upon transitioning to another state, I learned that sometimes it's not you, but it's your atmosphere. So, I had to change my environment, and moving from the country to the city was a big deal to me because we stayed deep in the country and we were never really allowed to get out and about until we were much older. But I see why, and I'm very grateful of that. Thanks, Mom. Now, we don't judge, we listen. While living in Texas, I learned to be myself and to explore my freedom. I moved with my dad to strengthen and refurbish my father-daughter relationship because he missed a chunk of our years while he was in prison. My mom and dad had 5 kids. I was the only one out of the 5 that wanted to go out of state to live with him because I always had these big dreams, goals, and visions that I couldn't accomplish if I stayed in Winsboro, Louisiana. That's my hometown, by the way. Upon arrival in Texas, my dad was laid back and content with whatever I wanted to do as long as I did it within the house, around him, or I told him about it. Anybody want a shot? My dad was so cool until I took the cool for granted and hung around the wrong crowd. I did everything in my senior year with marijuana by my side. Let's not dig into that. My dad might be watching. Let's move on. Between 2017 and 2019, I worked on my personality and self-love since I felt I had the freedom to do so. I also contracted my first curable STD, and that almost took the breath away from me because I'm allergic to the one medicine, penicillin, and that's what they use to cure it. I was distraught, so best believe I was no longer influenced by other people to have a small thinking mind. After that, I learned to stop fornicating the wrong way, but I was never taught how to fornicate other ways in safety. Anyways, it was a variety of different races in Texas than Louisiana, so I started learning myself, all while trying to take care of men older than me. I graduated in 2018 and started some college in 2019 until I dropped out because everything I learned in business class I had already learned from the rich people I was hanging around every weekend. Now fast forward to 2020. When COVID hit, I wanted to settle down and find love and support. I was a young entrepreneur doing Amway, being around millionaires every weekend, learning about money and financial freedom. But unfortunately, I found myself giving more to people than what they gave me. This drained me of my emotions and mentality. But I just figured people go through things, they hurt people they're around, and then they will apologize later on. Around this time, I became pregnant with my daughter and found myself in a domestic violence situation. Come to find out, I believe I provoked someone to abuse me because I was mentally forcing them to change when they simply didn't want to change or feel the need to change, to adapt to me as I adapted to them. I didn't know I was the problem until I realized I was the one who settled for 5 red flags instead of 15. But I wanted a normal life with a normal guy. I wanted someone to take care of me while I was taking care of them, supposedly. I thought that once I became pregnant, he would stop bringing foreign influences in the house, but unfortunately, they were in a different world from my world at the time. So, around 6 to 8 months pregnant, I met someone that broke the Bible down to me from Genesis to Revelations and told me everything that I learned as a child in church was a misunderstanding of the Holy Scriptures from past generations of personal teachings. But those same misunderstandings were pieces, a part of the Bible, and then he cleared those misunderstandings. And since then, my life has changed forever. and around 7 to 8 months pregnant, which was the beginning of my third trimester, I locked myself in my room of my abusive home and put everything I owned for me and the baby outside of the room window. I then told my child's father that I was going to the corner store to get snacks while he was stuck inside of his video game. And I put everything in my car and slept in my car in another city until I realized I was being selfish to myself and I needed to tell my family what was going on because I was 1 month from delivering my first child. My family then found out the next day. I drove 5 hours to Louisiana, 8 months pregnant and sick, diagnosed with COVID-19. After my daughter was born, I felt I had a new chance at life because now I was a mother to life. So after her birth, I put all my unsolved trauma to the side and I carried on in life. But throughout my history, you may see that I've faced many things and none of it has ever been talked about or solved mentally or emotionally. I have always wanted to write a book or a dialogue on my life, but I never started because I'm still living it. And this is only the beginning. Currently, I'm married with 2 kids and 1 potentially on the way. Still facing life with an unsolved case, but we can dissect that part piece by piece on the next section called Pieces of Adulthood. And as I mentioned before, the world may not view me as I view myself today, but today is gone and tomorrow is a new day. So let's refresh our minds and see what actions I need to take on to become a new me. As I ask that your heart be with charity and you hearken with an unjudging ear. I am Zahavah Mashayah, and thanks for listening to part 1 of A Child's Testimony on a Common Ground. Thank you. And that was the beginning of what I believe I'm trying to start, which is called A Common Ground. It's sort of like a podcast, but it revolves around the trauma and things I experienced throughout my childhood and my young adulthood, which I'm still learning to face so that I can become a better me and take care of my family. I know some unforeseen circumstances has happened in my life, but I'm learning to continue to take 100% full responsibility over the things that happened in my life because of the actions that I took. Me, knowing me, in 2022, I believe, if I can remember, I got rebaptized into what I believe to be known as the truth. Since then, I've willingly made sinful mistakes that now I am, unfortunately, going through. This is what it looks like to be tried by the fire, from my understanding. But nonetheless, we can talk about that another time. So thank you for allowing me to be me and give you a part of my history. Moving forward, I just pray and ask that you allow the Lord to open your ears while I allow the Lord to use me as a holy vessel for the things that he need done. Thank you for tuning in. I just want to end with a song. It's my podcast song. Sorry. This is the podcast for you to hear the truth. The truth is for you. This is the podcast for me to tell my truth. My truth is for you. So tune in. Come on, just tune in. And don't worry about a thing. The Most High about to do his thing. He gonna make a change. That's enough. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Don't turn me down. I am Zahavah, and thanks for tuning in. Peace.